Back on MorningLine, our guest is Jim Brown, author of Ending Our Uncivil War. We're just talking about public discourse on politics and civility and such. I mean, would you think right now it's as bad as it's ever been in this country, or do we live in the moment and think, wow, this is pretty rough, but if you really go back historically, you can see that we've been through times like this before?
A lot of my friends on the left and the right have been reading Meacham's book, The Soul of America.
You talked about that, and that's just, yeah.
And, you know, Huey Long in the 30s, and Joe McCarthy was popular for a period in the 50s, and George Wallace, and you look back on those times and you think, what were we thinking? And so the way we're talking to each other, I think we're probably going to look at this the same way. What were we thinking when we allowed the discourse to degrade to this level, and for people just not to have friends on the other side of the aisle? So it'll change. I think Meacham's got a very optimistic view of how our country's been 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and I believe it. I heard him speak several times about this, but at MBA with Governor Haslam. Awesome presentation, probably online if you want to look at it. But he's a very funny guy, and he's part of the change that's going on. And again, as I've gone around the state, a lot of folks are talking about this, and a lot of folks are engaging that used to be silent. So when I post something on Facebook a few years ago about this, I'd have 2 likes and 4 things, and not counting them. But now it's like everybody is getting on there and they're engaging, saying, I don't want it to be this way, and what can I do about it? That's why I wrote the book.
Gotcha. Let's go. Ann ends up next. Ann, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Ann.
I dealt with this by being quiet and not addressing it, and sat back and watched many a family dinner be ruined due to discussions. My daughter and her generation, on the other hand, in the last 10 or 15 years have had meaningful dialogue that has changed the tone. I spent yesterday with my older grandsons who are going sophomore and junior in high school, and was impressed with the intelligent conversation and dialogue. I think students are being taught how to have this conversation. I think the college generation from 15 years ago was taught to have this dialogue. My generation wasn't taught to have this dialogue with civility. And it comes with change, and it comes with being taught how to do it. And I'd like your comment on that.
Oh, I love that. Ann, thank you. So I wrote chapter 3 is Protect Speech, and what's been going on in our colleges and how there's been a degradation, safe spaces, victimization, cultural appropriation, all those things. And there's a group called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and they rank 400 and something schools on red, yellow, or green lights, whether they're protecting speech or not, in different ways. And it really got bad. And about 3 years ago, I think it started to shift the other way, and schools are paying more attention to having better, improving the atmosphere for fostering conversations, inviting controversial speakers, having protection there for anyone that wants to protest. And they're investing in this. Vanderbilt's doing it, Lipscomb, others. It's a really good thing that's occurring. It's not where it needs to be, but it needs our attention, and that's chapter 3. And then the other thing is, I'll mention Amanda Smithfield over at Hume Fogg. She's the librarian there, Librarian of the Year, wonderful person, very civically oriented. And she has young Republicans and young Democrats, and they get together regularly. And I got to speak to them in January, but they're in the same room talking to each other, and they're so much more mature than other people at their age than some of the 50 and 60-year-olds that we're watching online. But great comment, Ann.
Yeah, it's interesting when she talks about the younger generation. You have 2 children. How old are they now?
I have a 20-year-old at the University of Vermont, Catherine. Okay. And my son Will is going to Swanee. He just graduated from high school. Oh, he just graduated. So, I mean, the 2 of them, do you see in them some of what you're talking about? And are they a little different than you were when you were your age? They're way beyond where I was in my age.
Really? But in terms of what? What do you mean? Like,
just awareness of issues. I think maturity level in some ways. I think the phone thing is interesting there. The socializing, I probably had some better social skills in interpersonal because I was in front of people and I didn't have this.
That's a huge
challenge.
Yes.
That's a challenge for that generation. But as far as knowledge and engagement and just an understanding of the issues, they're way beyond where I was.
I just said tolerance and learning, hopefully. Well, they've got a great dad. So, I mean, let's go to Grady. Hi, Grady.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Now, you know, the thing that we can do is do nothing to change the way we are. The president went over to North Korea and come back and said he wants his people to be like Ho Chi Minh, Kim. And, you know, when he says something, stand up and be obedient. We're talking about totalitarian government, and something has got to be done about it. And, you know, to sit around and have no opinion on it is you know, that's where Rome fell. That's where Hitler come in. You know, you got to have an opinion on something and express it. Now, hang up and listen.
Okay, and Grady, you got right to it, and that's a great point. It made me think. So how do you answer that? You know, getting along. But there are some things, okay, and maybe people will disagree, that are just wrong, okay? And there may be open, but are wrong. For instance, genocide, okay? I don't know. If you're for genocide, you're wrong. Sorry, end of story, no debate. But, I mean, at what point do you say, well, look, I can't get along because what is being done here is so bad. And the problem is there's different levels of that. There are a lot of people that think what's happening with immigration wrong, but I know there's a lot of people on the other side that think, hey, look, if we have to separate the children from the parents and that sends the message, then we got to do it. Some people can't get past those two, and they're going to clash. Do you sit silent, or do you have to speak up?
I like some of what Grady's saying there, and I step away from it and I go, how did we get to this point where we can't, Congress, of course, I mentioned earlier, it's dysfunctional, and our collective voice, I feel it's at a low point. It's going to have to turn around.
Okay.
But what Senator Corker, and I got to visit with him last week when I was in Washington, and I've told him this, he tried to introduce an amendment on the Senate floor regarding, I think, trade.
Okay.
He wanted to have a debate, and he wasn't allowed by the leadership. And so what happens is this authority moves over into the other branches on a multitude of issues. Some of it is national security, some of it is immigration, but we're deciding things through a pen and a phone like Obama did. And if you were a Democrat, you were like cool with that. Now you're not cool with it. So my argument in the book is we've got to get Congress functional again, so some of these things that are being decided in an authoritarian way, get off that slippery slope, will be decided through our voice, through Congress, as much as possible.
They've got to express themselves. So is it okay?
And it's bipartisan.
Oh, no.
People on both sides and independents, they get that. So that's part of this movement that I think needs to continue.
So, again, you're not, when you talk about uncivil war and public discourse, you're not saying that you can't have an opinion. Of course you have an opinion, but you have to be mindful that there are different opinions than yours, and then how do you get along? So there was there's a couple of quotes that come to mind from the Tennessean op-ed, and Republican Senator Howard Baker and New York Democrat Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Baker said, you know, the other guy may be right. You gotta realize the other guy may be right. And Moynihan said that everyone's entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. And so if you're coming to an argument with facts and listening, you're going to have a productive conversation. If you're coming to an argument with facts or distortions and just a strong opinion, good luck with the conversation. There's not going to be any understanding when you leave that conversation. I like what Howard Baker was just.
He was awesome.
I mean, he was at a different level. They don't make them like him.
Need more of them.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to John. Good morning, John.
Yes, this is John.
Yeah, John, what's on your mind?
My question is, I was born in 1943 during the, I guess you call the baby boomers. And I'm 75 years old now. And my dad always taught me that when to treat others as you would want to be treated, like the golden rule, in other words. It's time for Christians to take a hold of this country and get us back in the right line, what God intended us to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, that idea of treating others the way you'd like to be treated makes sense. But everyone, and I see, you know, right at the top of the article, God is on our side. No, God is on our side. Everyone thinks God is on their side.
The Germans thought God was on their side, right?
Right.
So in World War II. So whose side is God on? I would say God is on everyone's side. The First Amendment, the 5 tenets of it, one of them is freedom of religion. And there are distortions in every religion. I did a chapter on this. The Christianity is quite rigid at the moment. The Western Christianity, Eastern Christianity is a little bit looser. But there are beautiful lessons in all religions. Buddhism, Hinduism, the Muslim faith. I have concerns with Sharia and some of the strictness in some countries, but there's also a lot of beauty in the Muslim religion if you study it, and don't think that everyone is here to take down 2 towers. So it's just exploring these things and finding the beauty and the commonality among these religions. If you look at the definition of love in all these religions, it's the same. It's the people who run these religions sometimes and the politicians who like to distort it.
Right.
And so I like I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, and I love my church, but I think we need to be mindful that separation of church and state, the true definition of that is we're not going to favor any religion over another. That's our country.
Right, not that religion is bad, it's just you can't choose one over the other, and everyone seems to think theirs is the only one, which I guess is human nature. But
Danbury Baptist in 1801, that's a wonderful opinion from Jefferson, and it's timeless. I encourage him to go read that.
And you write that churchgoers on both sides of our, quote, national mess are reluctant to turn a cheek. Aren't they supposed? I mean, you always, the line, what
because they think they're going to be weak.
Yeah. Okay.
That's because yeah, I think if you turn the cheek, you're weak. But that's not what Christ taught. Christ said, turn the cheek and look back at the person and be strong and loving and share what you believe. Turning the cheek is not being weak.
So why don't they know that? Where's it coming from that you think turning the cheek is weak, or?
The least of our brothers at the border. There are a lot of Republicans I know that don't like that. I don't like it, the way that policy has been determined. And I had one friend that said, I can't believe that a mother would put her children in that position. And I'm like, well, that's your view, because you're a mother and you're a wonderful mother, but you're not a mother in El Salvador watching people in that town be murdered.
Yeah, fleeing gangs or whatever.
Gangs.
Yeah,
and it's not all immigrants, but you're not in her shoes. And I think what I encourage people to do is what is in To Kill a Mockingbird and what Scout said, which is you got to get in the other person's shoes.
Yeah. And that sometimes it's very important. It's not always easy to do, but you got to take some time to think it. And one way to do that's like what you said earlier is get to know them.
That's Christianity in its beautiful form.
Okay, let's take a break on that note. When we come back, more of your calls, 737-7587. The question out there again, how do you handle the public discourse if you run into someone that obviously you have philosophical different views and you just think, I just can't see where that person's coming from. Do you get along? Do you talk? Do you just clam up? Do you walk away? Our final segment with Jim Brown right after this.